Thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. Khamry and I will introduce ourselves in a second. I guess I should start with that. Hello, everyone. Steve Cramer, UNCG business/entrepreneurship librarian. Know a lot of you from kind of the connections we have between the Entrepreneurship and Libraries Conference, Entrelib, ELC, and LBB. And Kelly is here from North Liberty in Iowa, who is one of our co-directors, but also have ties to Blink, which is Business Librarianship, North Carolina. And Jana from Durham Public is a member, and Carlo is not maybe officially a member, but really is in spirit. And it's significant because it's mostly half academic, half public business librarians. And we really value the interaction and learning from each other. A lot of the business librarianship, I think, has gotten too academic focused and less opportunities. And so, it's really wonderful that Megan and ALA have sponsored the sessions too. Khamry, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Khamry Varfley. I am the curator and program manager for a nonprofit called Gather RI, and I oversee our biographical library and our portrait gallery. And I have a couple connections to some folks on here, some through Libraries as Launchpads, which was a program in which I was certified an entrepreneurship librarians specialist. And also, I am the co-chair for the actually with Steve for the upcoming conference in November. So that's also very exciting. So yeah, I'm just very excited to chat with everyone today. I think most people here are meeting me for the first time today. Yeah,
All
and
right,
then,
thank you. Oh,
yep,
sorry.
Steve, let me know if you're good to share your screen.
Right, yep, I'll do that in a second, Khamry. Thank you. Our plan today, Khamry and I worked together on this. We have just 9 slides of information we want to go through. There's at least one discussion question in the middle of them. And then set in the second half of our remaining time for discussion, because we know many of you already do some of this work or have experience working with nonprofits. And so we hope, given the spirit of this group and the Zoom sessions that Megan hosts, that we just chat and share and talk. So that'll be part 2 today. All right, let me share screen. Khamry, do we want introduction questions anytime, or do we want to wait until our 9 slides are done? What do you think?
Let's hold off until the 9 slides are done. There is a specific portion where we could open up the
Okay,
floor for questions, but for the most part, we can wait till the end.
good. All right. Just as a preview, here are the questions we're going to come back to. This is slide like 11 or 12 slides. I'll just read this real quick, but we will come back to these. So as we go through our 9 slides of information, you might want to think about this and just for in terms of like, how can you join the discussion and give us your own knowledge and insights that you might have. So I'll be quiet for like 10 more seconds and then go back to slide 2. And I'm going to get started, but Khamry will jump in, right, Khamry? And then Khamry's going to lead a discussion as well at the end. So that's kind of how we're sharing. All right. I will put our email addresses into chat later. I've got that saved, ready to go. So first up, entrepreneurship, right? What does that mean? Briefly, because I know that's a big umbrella topic that we've all dealt with before. Our definition here, you can see maybe simplistic, but I think sometimes there's value in making it that short. So creating something to solve a problem. That's really what that turns into. And notice we have organization, not business, not nonprofit, and organization. And for example, actually, Kemi, let me turn back to you. Do you want to summarize the Fenty Beauty
Yeah,
group
for
that
sure.
you obviously know much about?
Yeah. So I know that entrepreneurship can sound like an intimidating term. It may be associated with having a business degree or having some sort of groundbreaking invention. But I always like to boil it down to literally creating an organization to solve a problem or fill a need. That's right over here. So it's not necessarily about tech. It's not necessarily about getting on Shark Tank. It's really about creating value by meeting a need. So the example I included is not a nonprofit, but it's one of my favorite examples to use whenever I'm instructing a class on entrepreneurship. So as someone who's also in the beauty sector, I like to say Fenty Beauty is an example of that by addressing the gap that was in the beauty industry. There weren't any diverse shade ranges for darker skinned women, and it was not very, easily accessible to the masses unless you were a pro makeup artist. So Fenty identified the problem of there not being enough shades or of quality or affordable and became an industry disruptor by launching the widest shade range of complexion products at that time. Again, keep in mind this is not a nonprofit, but again, an example I like to use of seeing a need and addressing that problem.
Kemi, your example reminded me of the old Johnson Johnson story when they came out with skin-colored Band-Aids, right?
Mhm.
Except what skin colors did they cover? Well, they only gave you one choice, right? It was not very inclusive, so they quickly had to fix that and make it better. Good, thank you. All right, so we mentioned organization, not necessarily company. So here's a distinction, a lot of data on this slide, we know. So we all know for-profits, they have taxable income, state and federal tax. They have to answer to their owners, which are often shareholders, and both public and private companies, as you know, can have and usually do have shareholders. Like the disclosure requirements are very weak unless you're publicly traded. That's different. But for like a private company, you have to report your officer's name. I mean, your owner, your CEO or president, whatever, and your address. So if you go to Social Security website, sorry, I misspoke. Go to the Secretary of State. There we go. Of most states, you can look up a company and you get a name and an address, and that's it, right? That's all you get. And they can incorporate different ways, limited liability company, partnerships, S Corp, C Corp, et cetera. On the other hand, nonprofits, we're going to make here kind of contrast differences before we get back to like how they're not that different at all. So as many of you know, they incorporate as a 401c3, but there are other types of 401s, 401D and E and F, et cetera. And many of them have to file an IRS Form 1023 to incorporate. And there is a board of directors, somewhat like you have in a corporation where there might be a board of directors that oversees missions and donors. But nonprofits are, as you know, exempt from income taxes, and any profit, really meaning, extra money they make, has to be funneled back to your organization, right? They can't use it for a salary boost, for example, or as a dividend to shareholders. They has to, put any extra money back into the organization to further its goals. So no big taxes, and that can return on their funds. And also, in contrast to the for-profits, they have to do a public requirement of inspection. And one example of that we'll come back to in a few slides is the RS 980 forms. So just contrasting, you can solve problems in your community, you can do social entrepreneurship, you can, create solutions, you can create products and services, either as for-profit or nonprofit. It's a decision you got to make when you get there. So question, do you think the entrepreneurship, sorry, loaded question, I know. Do you think entrepreneurship research is substantially different than what it would be for a for-profit company? Does the research look different or not? What do you think? You could type in the chat real quick if you like. And I can't see chat, so I'm trying to reset my settings here. Sorry. Khamry, would you mind just summarizing if there is chat? Oh, I see it now. Sorry.
I see very similar, yes and no, yes and no.
Okay.
No, they're the same.
Hey,
Great. Some
Bert.
nuance. Yeah. Well, let's give you one set of opinions on this, and this may
Hello.
be something we talk about in the end. Jen, I'm sorry. Did you want to talk? Okay. Okay. No, if someone wants to jump in, go ahead. All right. So this is our response. Not really. And I think this sort of generally follows what you're writing in the chat as well. So a nonprofit still has an industry, and we may not use that language. So code switching, right? We're kind of code switching here. And it's something that we need to think about as we work with a potential nonprofit entrepreneur versus for-profit. It's just kind of what words best match how they're thinking. But the concepts behind the words are very similar, if not the same. They have an industry. There are other organizations that exist for profit or profit or governmental that do the same thing. They have the same cost structures and have the same kind of revenue streams and try to do the same thing. So the research, the industry is still there. Likewise, the markets. We may not use the M word in the marketing, but they have people they're trying to serve, or communities, or citizens, or clients. There's also B2B, business to business, or organization to organization, nonprofits too. But there is people that would be the people that are consumers or households that are the markets for the organization. And you got to measure them, know who they are, what they think, what they want, et cetera. You have competitors. And again, that's that word we may not use a lot in this context. So another word we often use is partners, but there are other organizations that do similar things to what you're doing. That's part of being in an industry, right? And you have to be aware of them because you are frankly competing. Yes, you are competing for people, for money, for donors, for volunteers. Often the thought that you have a good goal in mind and you're passionate about a problem and you want to engage with people and understand what they need and work with them to support their needs, that's lovely. It's wonderful. It's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy, that you can ignore these factors. And finally, revenue streams. And we're going to get into this a bit more, but you need still to measure, to benchmark your finances. You will have cash flow. You will have income statements. You have balance sheets. The number one reason nonprofits fail, I read once, was because of cash flow. They didn't have enough money coming in each month to keep the expenses, being paid for. So you still got to do the financial research the same way we have to do that for a for-profit entrepreneur. So that's our answer, and it's kind of hard to see, but the business model canvas is on screen. I bet most of you have seen this before, just to indicate that the standard tools for planning a business also apply for nonprofits. It's a matter, again, of taxation and to some extent just uh, payment for the officers, because you don't get dividends and you don't have shareholders. But still, the same structure that we use to help plan a business also apply in this case too.
Yep. And I always tell a lot of my patrons is that this is the part where passion meets planning. So even if you're
Mm.
doing work that truly is from the heart, you still need to understand the field that you're entering. You still need to know who your audience is and how they behave. You still need to know who is solving the same problem as you and what makes you any different. And you still need to have a budget. So those are some things that, in the sense where a standard business model or a for-profit overlaps with nonprofit.
Yeah, definitely. You need to be sustainable, right? It's your passion is wonderful that you want to help people, but it's not sustainable. You're not going to be around very long. You might lose a lot of money, frankly, that you can't recover. All right. So here's a discussion. I think Camry, actually, we might have you lead this discussion just because you
Yeah.
took ownership on this. You want to jump in?
Yeah, so
Thank you.
just opening up the floor for a little bit of a discussion. What are some possible strategies for a nonprofit to generate revenue? So think about the places you've donated to or orgs you've worked with. How do they keep the lights on? You could either unmute yourself, put some things in the chat. Yeah.
Membership fees, certainly. Jessica, thank you.
Grants and other funding. Yep.
We always hope for grants, right? Or the
Mhm.
free government money, right? I bet many of you have had someone walk in and say, well, how do I get the free government money to start my nonprofit? And sometimes, yeah, but usually that's not going to be available or even sustainable way to go.
Yep.
I
Nothing.
was try I was trying to find a raise your hand, but I couldn't find it at the moment. So,
Go ahead,
um,
Kristen.
this is Kristen. I have significant nonprofit background in like I've worked in that field, and grants are not an early issue. So I think that it's really important that all of us be very real with people that want to establish a nonprofit. You don't almost never get grants right up front. They've got to establish individual donors that are following that same cause. And that's a lot of work. And I think that's a lot of the problem with cash flow and people not surviving is they're thinking that there's a bunch of people just waiting to say, oh, I've got great, big, huge bundles of grant money because you have a good idea. No, they're going to want the same thing as with a business to see that you've sustained operations and got individual donors and other, um, your services are already moving. So I
Yeah,
think realism is a good thing to,
thank you, Kristen. Yeah,
to
it's
share.
hard, isn't it? Because you want to be helpful and support their passion and their interest in solving a problem, but also set expectations maybe in a better place, but be emotionally intelligent at the same time, right? And that's we librarians have many,
Mm.
many skills, and maybe we can handle this dance of needs, but it's not easy.
I think diversifying revenue streams is a really important thing. That's what I teach when I teach some of the nonprofit classes I teach. That was a lot of teaching in one sentence, I'm sorry. Um, but just kind of diversifying those revenue streams and finding a bunch of different ways to raise money. And I agree with Kristen that like you're probably going to be 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years down the line before you start getting those grants. And really grants are only 15% of the of what you get to sustain you. And the majority of what sustains you is those individual donors. But it is keeping, like Steve said, I think keeping the realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Um, And remembering UBIT and remembering how the Metropolitan Museum of Art gets around UBIT, because that's one of the best examples, I think, ever, if anybody knows of that, that because they relate everything back to their collection in their magazine, it goes, they don't have to pay UBIT on anything. And I love that.
That's that fall air.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I see that there were a lot of yeah, a lot of the chats over here basically sums it up. But yeah, Steve, you can do the next slide. So yes, there are grants. And I say this to my patrons all the time. Yes, there are grants out there, but they're hard to get and it's very competitive. But you know, it's not the only way to generate revenue, like most of the comments in the chat said. There is the option for memberships. So I'm going to use my own nonprofit organization as an example. So for Gather RI, we do offer memberships on an individual and institutional level. So individual folks could sign up for memberships as well as organizations as a whole. There is merchandise. So that is a combination of branded merchandise and wholesale items. So we could have Gather RI t-shirts and pens and bookmarks and all of that, but we could also sell wholesale items like some of those Pantone sketchbooks and things like that. But also being very intentional with what merchandise you are going to sell, something that makes sense for you. You don't just want to sell merchandise for the sake of selling merchandise. Going back to thinking like a business, what will actually move out of your organization. And then for donations, so this is for both one time or on a recurring basis. Definitely leveraging the one time donations like Giving Tuesday, and we have 401 Gives, but also trying to have that recurring donation basis be sustainable as well. And I'm not going to get too much into the whole donation structures of a nonprofit, but there's also a way to kind of offer like little incentives. It can't be too much in a sense where it becomes a sale, but there's a way to kind of offer a small incentive for donations. For Gather I, we also offer kind of in exchange for a donation, you could also be part of like our founding circle because we are in our launch phase. We just opened. We want to generate excitement and get those donations. So when folks are excited, they're more inclined to donate. And for space rentals, if the nonprofit organization space permits, space rentals are a great way to generate revenue. This is for individual members, non-members, and organizations. So this is offering spaces for folks who need spaces for conferences, for workshops, professional development sessions, or even social events. Like we're already getting inquiries for engagement parties and dinner parties. So that's a great way to generate revenue. And then there are also ticketed events. So outside of our regular programming, there are special events that are ticketed, like our speaking events, special performances, or our gallery shows. We specifically use Eventbrite, but that isn't the only platform to use for ticket management. That's also a great way to generate revenue. And then fee for service really depends on the nonprofit. I've worked with nonprofits such as there is one in Rhode Island that specifically works with neurodivergent populations. And they offer services like consulting in terms of they would go to libraries and instruct librarians on how to offer programming for neurodivergent individuals. So that's some examples for revenue.
Yeah, thank you, Khamry. I think we often think of nonprofits in social science context, and that's certainly a big part of, the nonprofit and just, well, not industry, it's not industry, nonprofit sector, I guess. But think about arts entrepreneurship, for example, and Khamry alluded to that a couple times. I live in Winston-Salem. It's the next county over from Greensboro. We have downtown a wonderful bookstore called Bookmarks and a wonderful independent theater called Aperture. They are both nonprofits. Bookmarks originally was, or it still is, a literacy organization that partners with the library, the public library, and other groups in city education, but also now has a bookstore. And Aperture began as a for-profit theater, now it's a nonprofit theater, so you can switch, and that's example arts. One other example, in Greensboro, we have a well-known manufacturing company called Industries of the Blind. They employ blind persons. And for example, one of their specialties is doing military contracts, making clothing textiles for the military. Think about the technology and specialized processes required to satisfy the needs of the military regarding clothing, including battlefield clothing. So it's a factory. They make stuff, and that's a nonprofit. So any revenue streams, but often one of these seven tend to be what we focus on. And we need to help people research these, right? And as many of you commented, it's not something where you just expect to have grants or a one-off event once a year. You need to have often monthly income, cash flow for this to work. And Jana, yeah, thank you for your comment. I hope everyone saw that in chat. We really recommend that you consider whether you're willing to do this or not. That's a good message. All right. I bet many of you have looked at or used, or maybe even filled out some of you IRS 990 forms before. So this is part of the public declaration of information that most all nonprofits have to do. There's different versions. There's an easy form, 990 easy, obviously meaning simple, easy. For smaller ones, private foundations do a PF where you can see where they get their money from. Usually it's investments, and who they give money to and how much. That's often interesting to look at. But most of them have to fill out a regular 990 form, which covers these 4 or 5 topics and others too. So the financials are in there, where they get the money from, the goals. So there's some work, sentences in there about what they're trying to do. And I often have interest, maybe not professional, but it's interesting to me how much money some get paid. I work in the academic sector, and we buy a lot of databases and e-journals from nonprofit publishers, APA, American Chemical Society, and they pay their officers a ton of money. You wonder why we pay so much money for those databases and e-journals. Well, partly because they pay over $1 million sometimes for the officers. Maybe that's worthwhile. That's another discussion. And who the board members are. And these are pretty easy to find. Some of you know there are many more than 3 choices, but these are the ones that I think are most famous. I think Khamry agrees with me because she didn't add anything to this. So Candid/GuideStar, once independent organizations now kind of combined. ProPublica has a site you don't have to have an account to use. Unlike Candid, you have to create a free account to see the 90 forms. Charity Navigator is part of their function of helping us decide if we want to donate money or not. More of a kind of a household focus than Candid, I think, which is more of an insider, product, but also has this as well. And there are others too. If you have other ones you'd like to use that are on this list, put them in the chat and we'll share that too. Last point here. This could be easily expanded depending on what you use. Again, if we have other ideas about this, that'd be something good for us to talk about. Candid, GuideStar, and Charity Navigator do have lists or search engines for nonprofits, and they both have also what I would call industry lists, where you can look up subjects. I guess subjects might be a better word. So like dance organizations. It's not NICS codes, NAICS codes, for those of you, probably all of you know what those are. Industry codes defined by the census. They're not that kind of structure, but it's still a hierarchical set of language that are relevant for nonprofits. And it's an easy way to search a city or a state and click on child services, for example, and you get a list of hits. Data Axle, formerly Reference USA, as you know, covers not any organization that has an address, a physical location, establishment, technically. And that includes nonprofits too. You can't check a box in Data Axle for nonprofits. That's not one of the filters it has. It's just not something they cover. Although that'd be interesting if they did. Just tell them to do that someday. But you can at least do searching for a known nonprofit and its subsidiaries or locations at least. I guess subsidiaries wasn't the right word to use, but like Boy Scouts of America or now Scouting, see where they're located and see what locations they have in your state. But there may also be local organizations. Jana mentioned North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, for example, which I have in this list too. There is an organization in this county, Greensboro County, where I work, that is a nonprofit that supports nonprofits, Guilford Nonprofit Consortium. And they have many hundreds of members, and they list them. So a little search engine locally for that as well. All right, and now we're down to discussion. I'm going to stop sharing screen, but put these 3 questions in the chat and ask you to respond to any of them or something else about nonprofits, or if you have additional 990 stories or search engines you like, that would also be perfectly appropriate at this point. Khamry, any words from you before we get into our discussion?
I think the last piece I really have to say is that a lot of folks don't really, at least in my experience, don't really think to look to the library for help in starting their nonprofit. It's a lot of people think the library is just this brick building with books, and we've come such a long way from that. But I truly believe that libraries and nonprofits, that is a very great relationship, and libraries are such a vital resource, and librarians can offer a lot of help to those interested in starting a nonprofit. And at least for the library I worked for, I was essentially the bridge between like nonprofit and social entrepreneurs to like resources they didn't know were available. So this meant like running programs dedicated to business plan writing, how to conduct market research, things like that. But yeah, a lot of people don't know to use the library as a resource. So it'd be great for us to act as bridges for folks.
Um, I just want to say that I am the business nonprofit librarian here at the library. So I do both of those things, but we mostly teach grants
Mm.
and like financial planning and sort of things that come from Candid. But we're trying to branch out from that. So that's kind of exciting. And I did a search, and A to Z Databases does have nonprofit organizations as a pullout that you can just search in your area. It's not overly I don't know the accuracy and what it contains as what is a nonprofit and what isn't, because it gives us 421 results. Um, and I know we have almost 1,900 nonprofits in Erie County, but I might just be searching the city and not Erie County. So I might have outsmarted myself with my search. And Kristen asked which library, Rachel, and I'm at the Erie County Public Library in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Rachel. Next time I talk to Dave Turner, who is our North Carolina NC Live data Axle representative, I'm going to ask him about that question. As you know, both Dun& Bradstreet, A to Z, and Data Axle start off with public records for their establishments, the Secretary of State data, which, as we talked about already, is very limited, and then they do phone calls largely, and sometimes web searching to add details into their records. So I wonder how A to Z, even though it seems limited, would collect that, unless it's through phone calls or some other kind of data they can do.
I've been a little bit struggling with what to do with this issue because I have such significant nonprofit background, and it is, I think, the thing that Jana quoted about, we would really ask you to consider whether this is, it's kind of the same thing with a business idea, really doing a solid job of researching your competition. And in nonprofits, I would almost say it's even more competition than it is in business because you are raising funds and it's not easy to do that. And if you have a lot of nonprofits in your area that do the same thing, it's going to be even harder. And so I've been trying to figure out what would make sense for us to do. We do offer people access to Candid. So that is something that we could show more established nonprofits how to use the database for grants. But early on nonprofits, I really would not direct them that way because it's just a waste of time, honestly. But we do serve nonprofits. Our SCORE chapter works with nonprofits. And I love the idea of kind of looking at the business plan in a nonprofit lens, through a nonprofit lens, and helping them to really structure and think through um, how their passion really could come to life, or how they could partner with another organization that's already existing to incorporate their ideas, and they could bring their resources to work together with another nonprofit or with another someone who's also trying to build something. So I'd be interested in what else, to hearing what else any of y'all are doing specifically supporting the nonprofits.
Kristen, thank you. Good points. Some of you have seen or maybe you work with it all the time, that the infamous SCORE spreadsheet. There's a website, they have a giant spreadsheet that we use in our classes here at UNCG. And maybe this is emotionally intelligent, we're talking about, maybe this is hardcore. But as soon as you hear someone who's really serious about it, Say, here's a spreadsheet, you need to fill this out, or else you're not going to work. And if they just totally don't want to do that at all, well, then maybe that's good evidence and a good way for us to educate them a little bit, if that's not too condescending to say about that they should not pursue this. But still, you need to do this. You need to figure out if you need salary or not, right? There's a salary line. Are you giving yourself a living salary, are you living wage or not? Or are you going to work for free, and or because or just your household going to survive on your partner's income, if your partner has income, if you have a partner at all. So I think that's a good point about score.
One of the things, and maybe this is going down a different path than we're talking about, but one of the things that I get to do at BYU is I work with the Ballard Center for Social Impact, and they have a whole system in place for students to kind of be involved in social impact projects, either for profit or nonprofit. But they really emphasize the phase before you go out and try to make changes or try to implement changes is really understanding and loving whatever the problem, quote unquote, problem that you are defining is, and understanding the people who you're hoping to serve and co-creating solutions with them, and not just somebody has what they think is a great idea and then launching forward with it without really understanding who they are serving or what it is that they're trying to address with their nonprofit. So doing some of that research up front can be meaningful and make meaningful change.
I feel like this is an area of real uh, possibility for librarians, because this seems to be a common issue across a lot of topics, that people want to cut short the research element that is so critical. Careers, job seeking, small business, obviously, nonprofits, all of these need, and really finance to some degree. People want a fast solution for income, or we teach teens about money. They all want to invest, but what does it take to invest? I mean, at first you have to actually earn money, and you have to be able to live on less than you earn so that you have money to invest. So it's the research and the baseline for things. So I think that because research is so important, it is a place where libraries fit very well.
Yeah, I agree. Too many times I've had to tell some of my patrons that that's not a step you can skip. You want to save yourself the trouble in the long run, and doing everything correct now, so you don't have to deal with undoing what you did wrong, you know?
I'd say that's been probably the biggest problem with the nonprofits who've come in to see us, is that they sort of have this dream that of whatever nonprofit they want to, cause that they want to assist with, but they don't know who else is working in the area. They do think that there's a magical grant for everybody out there that's very easy to access. They're really unfamiliar with nonprofit structure. Strangely, I get a lot of people who want to open a business and a nonprofit simultaneously, with very convoluted plans. And I'm always like, you could do that if you'd like to also check yourself into a psychiatric hospital. Please don't. Let's discuss. That sounds a terrible idea. But yeah, that research where they're really fully forming the idea is definitely not there at all, and something definitely that we can support more. It's just hard to know what would be most effective. Maybe that might be like a research 101 class, like how do you do the market research? How do you understand your market, to help people be able to get where they want to go, or not, and just pick something else that won't be as terrible.
I
Yeah, I
also,
think, sorry,
oh,
go ahead,
no, go
Rachel.
ahead, Steve.
Oh, okay, I'll be quick, sorry. I think a lot of the programming, as we've already kind of established, that we already do for like industry research, market research, totally applies. But we might have to change language, right? Because a nonprofit-oriented mindset, a person who's passionate and wants to start a nonprofit may not feel like going to a entrepreneurship or a small business workshop may not be what they need, even though they would definitely probably benefit from that as well. But it might take more language, and that's more labor, right? Because you're duplicating a workshop with different languages assigned to it. But that might be what we need. And as you alluded to, it's and some of you've done this as well. It's library as connector, right? Like Carlo is doing some wonderful workshop for public librarians in North Carolina using NC IDEA. And part of the focus is simply that we know people, we can connect people, right? In addition to providing spaces and services and content and expertise of us, we also help people connect to the Chamber of Commerce or to a nonprofit center or government office, et cetera. And we might be the places to connect people so they don't feel isolated and so they know what resources are out there. That could also be our role for this kind of group as well as for nonprofits or as well as for profits. Rachel.
So along with what Jana was kind of saying is I get a lot of people who wanted to start a business and then realize that that people won't give you money to make money, like grants. And so they're like, well, I'm going to turn it into a nonprofit now. And I want to be like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Because, there are rules to be a nonprofit. The IRS has rules, and we all know that. Thank you, Brittany, for I get a lot of this. Thank you for feeling my pain. But I also think that talking about when you're working with nonprofits and it's, whoever posted do you really want to start a new nonprofit? That really spoke to me because I have somebody who's starting a new nonprofit in our area, and it's an autism nonprofit. And I just want to be like, there are so many autism nonprofits out there, and I'm not saying you shouldn't create a new one, but what I want to ask you is, what are you doing differently than what everybody else is doing? And why can't you work for one of these other nonprofits that is doing great work in autism that's in our area already? And it's like, I have a master's in nonprofit administration as well as a master's in library and information science. And it's like the people that I went to school with who wanted to create theater companies because they weren't getting cast in theater programs in their area or like in shows. So they were just like, I'm going to create a theater company so I can star in everything. That's kind of sometimes what I feel like, which is really horrible to say, but sometimes it's like, I don't like not working for myself and I have a passion project, so I'm going to start a nonprofit to do that passion project.
I hear you on that one, Rachel, especially here in Rhode Island. I mean, we are the smallest state in the country, and in Providence alone, we're so like the nonprofits per capita is kind of insane. So I do also have to ask them, like, seriously, like, what are you doing differently than what these 10 other nonprofits aren't already doing? And sometimes I feel like I have to be the bad cop and kind of ask those questions. But it's true, like I want to set them up for success. And I do want to ask them, like, what is so different that you'll be doing that these 5 exact organizations that I found aren't already doing? And why can't you maybe partner up with them, or maybe try doing one-off service projects with them and seeing what that's like? But yeah, like just in Providence, Rhode Island alone, there are a ton of nonprofits. So
Khamry, it's like for profit, right? What's your secret sauce or what is your unique value proposition? And if you can't answer that and you're just competing with all the other restaurants doing the same stuff, that's probably a problem.
exactly. And one of our biggest programs when I was still at the library was we did like elevator pitch kind of workshops. So that's what I usually recommend a lot of my patrons sign up for and kind of practice, like, what are you going to be able to pitch to me that maybe I haven't heard a bunch of time from these other folks who want to start a nonprofit? So yeah, if they really can't answer that question, then we have to reassess a little bit.
Danielle, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what both Jana and Rachel said about specifically about people who kind of want to start their business and their nonprofit at the same time. And I, as the small business consultant, like people are just coming at me, throwing their entire ideas and saying, so how do I make this a business? But also I want my business to have a nonprofit. And I don't want to say like curb the enthusiasm, but like, how do we like kind of rein it in, because the sentiment is nice, that they do want to eventually extend their business to a nonprofit. But it's just sometimes it's like let's reel it in a bit.
Definitely. And for-profits can still do good in our communities and be social entrepreneurship ventures, right? It's not necessarily either or binary distinction between doing good has to be nonprofit. Yeah, B Corps, Rachel. Rachel, tell us what B Corps are.
Sorry, every year I have a lawyer and a nonprofit administrator come in and talk about different legal structures for your business or your nonprofit. And so a B Corp is a corporation that does good. Like the best example I can think of is Patagonia. So for those of you that know Patagonia, for every time you purchase something, they donate money back to help preserve the earth. And so companies that offer good from their service from sale of their Tom Shoes does too, and Bombas, I think, donates socks to people who are unhoused, and so it's you do good as well. Like for every time somebody buys something, you donate something, or maybe you can also do it like if you don't sell like if you sell insurance, so you don't really have a product that you could give away, you could pay your staff to volunteer. And if you like pay your staff to volunteer, they get like 15 hours, like 72 hours of paid work every year to go volunteer for their favorite charity, and they can pick the charity or something like that. So those are what B Corps are.
Thank you.
Other thoughts or experiences or questions or best practices that you all have about nonprofits from your experience or just from questions that came up today?
I want to say one more thing, if that's okay. I think it's really important that we don't it's good to have temperance, I guess, and be realistic and do things carefully and well researched and things, but there's also something about people who have this entrepreneurial spirit and enthusiasm for what they're doing, and part of our job, I think, as librarians supporting businesses and new ventures is to encourage that, right? Instead of being like, well, pulling on the reins all the time and slowing people down, is encouraging that sort of free thinking and creativity as well. So. For
I'll
sure.
say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope.
I will say Megan has heard me talk about this before. We have a beehive here in Erie where we have the universities that work together with the public library, and each university, we call them nodes, has a different part that they focus on in small business. And we've been talking lately about bringing on a partner to do strictly nonprofit work with us. And so that's how much we see the need, is that not only are we going to focus on business and different things like the business, like marketing and crowdfunding and business planning and things like that, but we're also looking to start the nonprofit part of that too. Nonprofit entrepreneur in residence, that would be very cool to have. Thanks for the idea, Steve. I'm writing a grant.
I haven't heard of that, Rachel. I mean, entrepreneur residence, everyone has that. But I haven't heard of that idea. That'd be cool. Yeah, good luck. And let us know what happens.
I just want to jump in. I'm not a librarian, but I really appreciate what Jessica said in terms of keeping in balance, the reality check with still nurturing somebody's passion and their drive. I do think that it's pretty impossible sometimes to convince a committed, entrepreneurially minded person not to do something that they have a mind to do. So I think that librarians have a really unique you occupy a really special place in the community and in people's minds, such that I think you're in a great spot to say, okay, if you try this and this seems really hard and you're running into lots of things that feel pretty impossible about this, come back and we'll talk about what you can do. That might land better with somebody, and you sort of know what's going to happen, maybe more so than a first-time founder, for profit or nonprofit. But I think that could land better, and it increases the chances that they'll come back because you didn't just try to get them to do something else. You didn't try to get them to stop creating something. You were just like, yeah, I think that might be really hard, and if you think it is, then come back and we can talk about some strategies. Seems like a great balance.
And in that vein, it could also be, it's also very rewarding to see the fruits of their labor and to see their success story. So it's very rewarding at the same time. And for entrepreneurs, the entrepreneur life can be very lonely and isolating, but being a librarian and being that person that's with them for most of the step of the way, it's also very rewarding.
Steve, Khamry, final thoughts? We've got just a few minutes left here.
Everyone said such interesting and smart things. I don't think I have anything more to say. Khamry?
Well, just thank you for having me.
Mhm.
Always a pleasure. And yeah, no, it's great to hear so many different things from everyone. And like I said, always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, this was an awesome discussion. I feel like we need to write a blog post or something to follow up on this because there's just a lot circulating here. Very cool. Anybody else? Final thoughts, comments? Anybody doing anything fun this summer?
I just want to ask if Jana and Kristen and Jessica wouldn't mind putting their emails in chat or sending me a message. I'd love to follow up with you on some things. I'll put my email in chat if you just want to send me a message. And if anybody else does, I'm happy to talk. But I just really would love to be able to talk to a bunch of you. So thank you.
One resource I was going to mention, just something that we use to manage expectations whether it's a business, a for-profit or a nonprofit, and someone comes in and says, I want to start a restaurant and I know it's going to make, 50% profit or whatever. We, through our ProQuest subscription, have access to a publication called First Research Industry Profiles. It's a Dun & Bradstreet publication, and it gives kind of a nice, it's like a 12 to 15 page summary of various industries. And I was looking it up, and there's there's a couple that are nonprofit. There's one on nonprofit institutions, but sometimes people don't want to take our word for it. But if we give them packaged research, a resource that's like, here's a snapshot, at least they can say, oh, there's this research that says really my profit margin is going to be more like 3% or whatever. And of course, we refer them to SCORE also, because then they can talk to folks that were in business and help manage expectations. But sometimes, especially for people, we work with a lot of people in our rural communities who don't know what they want to do. They just they're tired of working for somebody else. And so we can pull up those reports, which give kind of like, these are the regulations they have to consider, and these are the competitors, and they have industry experts that give their feedback in them too. So if you're not aware of that product, we find it helpful a lot of times. So
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Megan, for inviting Khamry and me to talk about this subject, and for all of you for engaging it, making it so easy to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was a great discussion. So Steve and Khamry, I'll be in touch about that blog post. And everyone else, I hope you have a great summer. Like I said, we're canceling the August meeting. If I'm not mistaken, though, our September meeting will have Lucretia talk to us about the Glow and Grow project she's been teasing us with for the last 6 months. So I'm really excited about that. And like I said, if other people want to facilitate a discussion, tell us about something cool you're doing, something you're thinking about, let me know. I'd love to have you. Thanks, everybody. I will leave the line open if anybody wants to hang back and chat, but otherwise, yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.